So as it was explained, so I'm a CNS researcher at Sorbonne University at the INSP. And we are mostly working on experimental quantum optics. We are a small group working really on quantum optics, experimental quantum optics. We do a lot of work in really fundamental work, generation of non-classical light, characterization, and so on. And in addition to that, we also aim to try to use this non-classical source of light for imaging and even further for microscopy. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about application of quantum imaging to the field of microscopy. My talk will be divided in three parts. So in the first part of the presentation, I will try to give you a brief but broad overview of the field of quantum imaging. Then I will focus a bit more on what's a subpart of quantum imaging, which is to achieve and develop imaging protocol with using correlated and entangled photons, which is mostly where we work. And then at the end, also depending on the time, I will give you a very concrete example of a recent work we have done, an application of the use of entangled photons or correlated photons to enhance, or at least to achieve some imaging protocols, in this case, adaptive optics, in a different way or better than what can be done classically. Also, I will take questions in the middle just to stop typically after this part, so you will be free to ask me questions in the middle of the presentation. So let's start with a brief overview of the field of quantum imaging, and maybe let's start with the formal definition of what do I mean by quantum imaging. Quantum imaging is the science of using non-classical states of light to achieve functionality or performance beyond what classical light allows. So the two important terms there are non-classical state of light, I will come back on that, and of course beyond what classical light allows. So what this term actually means, this is what I'm going to talk about in this first part. And to start, I will choose an example that you all know very well, which is an optical microscope. So an optical microscope is a very useful tool for biology and medicine, and with an optical microscope, a very simple one. I think this was a DIC microscope to image a cell. So I think it's very basic for all of you. And you get a magnified image of small objects. This is a cell. And as you know, this is all this community is about. All these microscopes have limitations. They have technical and fundamental limitations. One example that is very famous, if you try to magnify a bit more your object, at some point, you don't see the very small structure in your cell. All right? You are limited by diffraction. So this is the resolution, the transverse resolution limit of your system. To improve that, which is what many of you are doing, you try to improve the microscope that you are using. So you can improve the numerical aperture, you can use some smart technique to actually achieve a better resolution. But ultimately, there is a fundamental limit of what you can achieve and how much information you can get from your sample. And this limit is set by the nature of light. It's set by both its wave nature and its particle nature. Essentially, it's a combination of the Rayleigh criterion and the shot noise of the system that you can ultimately reach. So this is really a fundamental limit, spatial resolution. There are many others that turn out to exist in all the microscopes. So temporal resolution that translate also into contrast, sensitivity, aberration, penetration, depth. In a sense, you can, the way we see it very simply in our case, like you can build a very, very big and complex microscope. At the end, you will reach this limit. You will be limited in how much information you can get by these fundamental limits linked to the nature of light. Quantum imaging, very simply speaking, aims at overcoming these fundamental limits. And it does it by replacing the classical source of light by a non-classical source of light and adapting the detection and also sometimes the design of a microscope in order to achieve better performance or sometimes to design new imaging modalities. And yeah, for example, you could imagine to be able to see some structure that you cannot see with classical light, which is, again, We're not there yet, but that's one of the claims that we have in quantum imaging, to be able to see something that is even invisible for classical light. One important element of what I just said is the non-classical source of light. So maybe I should clarify a bit what I mean about that. If you take this very simple experiment, you have a source and you have a photon counter that is a perfect photon counter that can measure the number of photons during a very, very short time. At the end, you can measure the mean photon number that you have, and you can also measure the variance, okay? So you make many measurements, you have an average, and also you fluctuate because the measurement is quantized. Classical source of light, like thermal light or laser, they essentially are super Poissonian, which means that the variance is bigger than the mean, all right? What we define as a non-classical source of light, it's something that as a sub-Poissonian, it's sub-Poissonian, so it means that you can reach a variance that is smaller than the mean. This is a very broad definition, but essentially it tells you that the non-classical nature of, when we talk about non-classical light, it's tied to the statistical distribution of the photons that compose the light. And to achieve this sub-Poissonian behavior, there are actually many different kinds of non-classical sources that you can generate. This is the whole field of experimental quantum optics in general. And in imaging, there have been 3 different types of sources that have been used so far to try to enhance imaging system. And I'm going to go over the 3 of them very briefly with an example each time. And then after, I will focus more on the source of correlated photon and entangled photon, which is where I want to push a little bit the details here today. So the first type of source that has been used, which is probably the most known, what we call squeeze coherent state. You typically generate them using a cavity and nonlinear optics, like a system like OPO, for example. And this source, so the flux of photon that you have at the output, has this sub-Poissonian property. And in particular, you can have reduced fluctuation of photons over specific, like, for example, amplitude or phase of your signal. So then if you can build an imaging system that has a contrast mechanism that is based on the amplitude or the phase of the light that you are using, and you can also measure at the shot noise limit, you can effectively operate at sub-shot noise, making imaging a sub-shot noise, and then increase the signal-to-noise ratio that you have at the output. And this example is a recent one when they have developed a coherent Raman microscope scanning using a squeeze laser at the input, a squeeze coherent state, instead of classical laser. And they have shown that you can increase indeed the SNR in this kind of microscope by doing that. Squeeze light is also very known because it's used in LIGO or Virgo in order to increase the sensitivity when you do interferometry. The first source of light, so I won't talk more about that, but if you have a question, I will be happy to answer. The second source of non-classical light that is used are single photon emitters. In that case, the distribution is very simple. There is only one photon at a time at the output. You all know that atoms, molecules, artificial atoms like dots, quantum dots, emit this kind of source. In imaging, they have been used and they have been exploited for their particular nature. It means that when you send this kind of source onto a beam splitter, the photons goes only in one of the 2 outputs, which means that you don't have any coincidence at the output. So if you look at the correlation at the output of a beam splitter with this source, there is no correlation. And for example, it has been used in a scanning microscope in fluorescence with a sample marked with quantum dots by the group in Weissman, where instead of just measuring the intensity as you do conventionally, they increase the spatial resolution by measuring the correlation, what we call the G2, by essentially exploiting the lack of correlation that you have in your beam. So truly non-classical properties of the light exploited to achieve a better resolution. Finally, the last example of sources that has been used for imaging is a source of entangled photon pairs. In that case, you produce light that is only composed of photons that are pair. So in the beam here, it's just pairs going out. And these pairs have very particular correlation in space, time, spectral also, and polarization potentially. And for doing imaging with this kind of source, you exploit the correlation between the photons to improve, for example, in that case, it was spatial resolution and contrast, This is an intensity image of some cell that was taken here. And if you take the same situation, but instead you measure the correlation between the photons that illuminate your sample, you can increase the resolution and translate it into contrast in that case. So these three examples I've chosen them very carefully because I think they are among the most mature in the field, in a sense that it's the few realization where people have used non-classical source of light into a real microscope. They have some advantages, but you have to be very careful when you talk about advantages in quantum imaging, because when you try to practically implement the system, there are a lot of drawbacks. Typically here, okay, you can operate at the milliwatt, which is okay, but it's a very complex detection, 10 minutes, so everything must be very, very stable. Only 30% enhancement, if you have noise and losses, you lose everything. In that case, very long acquisition to measure this G2, around an hour, and only a ×2 enhancement. So do you want to pay the price of just a factor 2 for an hour enhancement? The last part is a bit the same problem. It's a very long detection, measuring all this correlation with only a square root of 2 enhancement. And more importantly, you have to be very careful with all this work, because typically, with non-classical source of light, you are in a very, very low flux regime, all right? And when the comparison is made with classical system, it's always, almost all the time, made at the same flux. Well, we all know that increasing the resolution, the first thing that you will probably do is just increase a bit the power of your laser as much as you can. I think we all agree that nanowatt, you won't burn your sample, but if you go maybe milliwatt, it will still be okay. So there is a reason for going low flux in biological sample, but maybe not as low. So we have to be careful when we talk about advantages, in particular for practical implementation. In spite of that, over the past, let's say, decade, there have been really a lot of research groups who have tried to move this concept of non-classical light and quantum optics to develop some imaging application, and in particular in microscopy. If you look at this is just many images that I've taken from Google Image when you write quantum imaging with photon pairs. You can see that there are some very simple proof of principle experiments that typically are done by group doing experimental quantum optics, trying to do imaging. But very recently, you also have some images where you can start to see what you are more familiar with, some biological specimen, plants, or the head of a bee. And this really shows that some microscopy, people doing really microscopy, have also started to look at what we do in quantum optics to implement them with their own constraints. So there is really, I think, not anymore the bottom-up approach, but also starting to get the other way around. And one, I think, technology improvement that has allowed that was the development of single photon sensitive cameras. So this is just the trend in the field of quantum imaging, quantum microscopy. And if you look, there is really a change in the dynamics as soon as we started to have, like, typically MCCD, and we started to use the MCCD for measuring correlation, and then the ability to actually measure single photon with a camera and as well measure the quantum properties of light with camera, it really pushed a lot the field, including recently the interest from pure microscopy group in trying to implement microscopy system with non-classical light. All right, so that was the general introduction of what I wanted to say, very broad, very general. Now I'm going to focus a bit more on what we do in the team, particularly exploiting photon pairs to do imaging. But before to get there, if you have any question on this general part, I will be happy to answer them now.
I guess you need to be working at very low temperatures for the quantum source, not even?
No. No, it's okay. Room temperature.
Okay, great. Thank you for the answer.
There are some systems, so yes and no. So most of many non-classical sources of light, you can have them at room temperature or by controlling a little bit the temperature of the crystal, but very simple. If you want to have, I don't know, you have some single photon emitter very pure that has to be at cryogenic temperature, but it's not a necessary requirement. I mean, all the molecules that you have in quantum dots that you mark in microscopy generate single photons at room temperature.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I'm wondering, so you show these experiments and you mentioned the improvement is still limited, but what is really the limit? I mean, if you could change whatever you want to make beautiful, better images, what would it be?
Can you repeat the question? So, do you mean, have we reached really the limit?
Well, if you could change anything,
Yeah.
better sources, better detectors, whatever, to get better imaging in quantum optics, what would it be? What is holding this back?
No, but it's mostly that. The source brightness and the way you detect. These two parameters are, if you can detect very well and have source as bright as you want, then you can implement all of that in any type of microscope and get always these extra advantages. Then there is the type of source, generally, technically we are limited to photon pairs. If you can accept that you can generate n photon Fock state, then essentially the improvement increase even more. So that is, you already can push the limit by exploiting the non-classicality of your source. If you have infinite technology available, yes. You disagree with that? No? Okay. So I will continue the second part of the presentation, which is going to be trying to focus a bit of one of the subfield of this quantum imaging, which is doing imaging using correlated photons. And this part will be a bit technically driven. I want to show you what type of images we measure when we do imaging with entangled and correlated photons. Maybe some of you have heard about correlation-based quantum imaging, and if it's the case, most of the time you have heard about ghost imaging. Ghost imaging is indeed an implementation of correlation-based quantum imaging that can also actually be implemented with classical correlation. What I want to highlight here is that ghost imaging is not the only system that use correlation between photons. There are many others that you can use to do resolution enhancement, subshot noise imaging, background noise reduction, and so on. And the one I'm going to talk in the third part will be in particular this new modality, including correlation-based adaptive optics. So the first thing I want to say is that ghost imaging, which generally you all know, is only a sub part of all the many things you can do with correlation-based quantum imaging. So in correlation-based quantum imaging, you have a source of entangled photons or correlated photons, an object and a detection at the output. Just for this part, I will remove the object. I will just focus on what do we generate and what do we measure when we do correlation-based quantum imaging. To generate photon pairs, coming back to the question there, it's actually pretty easy. You take a nonlinear crystal that looks like that. You can buy that on Tor Labs. And you shine a blue diode laser, the same one that are sold by Oxus just there. And if you do this system, you have a phenomenon, a nonlinear optics phenomenon that is called spontaneous parametric down conversion, which from time to time you have one blue photon that becomes two red photons. The properties of the photons, the flux, and are essentially set by the PAM properties and the crystal property. In our case, we're going to focus on something that gives us these properties. So the flux, the process is extremely inefficient. So you have typically 10 to 100 picowatt at the output. So very, very few pairs generated, centered around 8-10 nanometer and with same polarization. So let's do an experiment together there. We have this source of photon pairs, and well, it's going out over many, many modes. So let's take a camera to measure them. That's the easiest way of doing that. If you take a camera, well, a normal camera, you won't see that much. It's too weak. But if you take an EMCCD camera, over a couple of milliseconds and seconds, you get a nice image at the output. In that case, in that configuration, you get this very ring shape that is very characteristics of SPDC source. But that's not really what is interesting us here. In that case, you have an intensity image, but you don't really have any information about the collective behavior of the pair, so the correlation between the photons. So if we want to do quantum imaging with entangled photons, we need to be able to measure the correlation between the photons. So for that, we need to be able to measure coincidence between the photons at the different pixels at the output. Measure what we call the second order correlation function over the full spatial degrees of freedom. So technical problem. Let's see how we can do that. To do that, we need to, EMCCD can work, but here I'm going to show you some result with a single photon avalanche diode camera. So it's just an array of SPAD with some interesting characteristics for us. If you do the experiment, you turn on the laser and you let the pairs going on the sensor, and most of the time you have nothing on the frame, and from time you have 2 clicks, you measure a pair. Right. So you reproduce that many times in your system, and you collect the photons at the output, and if you just sum the image, you get the intensity image. So you sum all the threads, you get a normal intensity image, nothing really interesting there. But because you have access to all the photons individually, you can also start measuring correlation. For example, let's fix this pixel as a reference pixel. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to look at this pixel and only keep the other click if I have a click at this pixel. It's called a conditional image. You condition your image onto a click at this pixel. You redo again the experiment. And now if you look at your image, instead of having something like that, which is what you will get if everything was completely uncorrelated, okay, the photon will go anywhere. Instead of having something like that, you have something that is completely black everywhere, so no probability, with only a bright peak exactly at the symmetric relative to this pixel. This means that in this configuration with this crystal and this pump, I need my hands. And in fact, when you do this type of measurement, what we call this G2, so the correlation image or G2 matrix, you have effectively as many conditional image as the number of pixels of your sensor. So you characterize entirely the correlation between your photon pairs by doing this type of experiment. This is one thing that is very important. When you do imaging, correlation-based imaging with photon pairs, you need to access both this information. If you access that, you have no advantages in doing that with photon pairs rather than any other type of classical source. As soon as you want to exploit really the properties of your photon source, of the non-classical source, you need to measure the G2 there. And this G2, here I have shown you a very, very simple example. When you have a thin crystal, a pump collimated, that Fourier imaging, and this is the intensity, and this is just the G2, but projected along some coordinate to have a better visualization. But the fact that you have a sharp peak here is a signature of the strong anti-correlation. If you change the type of crystal, the pump, or even the configuration you have here, you can see different type of correlation. For example, if you image the surface of the crystal instead of Fourier imaging, in that case, you have a beam that looks like Gaussian in intensity, no information, but you have a sharp peak when you project onto the minus coordinate, which means that in that case, the photons are strongly correlated in position on your sensor. So they always arrive at the same place on the camera. So different type of correlation, but still some correlation. Some more example, if you shape the pump, you can even have something very interesting where you have absolutely nothing in the intensity, but when you look at the correlation, you get information about your object. Okay, it has been used for different other techniques. Same here, you can also change the properties of your crystal. Instead of having one here, we have a twin crystal, rotated 90 degrees by each other, type 1 BBO. And in that case, same story, you can put a birefringent phase object here, and you have nothing in the intensity, but you start seeing something under some projection of the G2. Okay? The main message here, these are just some examples. The main message here is that when you use entangled photon pairs, the important information bit is in the correlation image, is in the G2 matrix. You need to be able to do that if you want to do something with your non-classical source. Practically, I've shown you an example with SPAD camera. This typically takes 10 or to 2 hours of acquisition for a single image of G2. EMCCD, it's even worse. More pixels, but 10 hours to up to 2 days for getting these images in correlation. What we have recently is this Timepics camera. Talked a little bit about it yesterday, which allows us to go much, much faster. How this, just want to highlight this, how this works, it's not really a frame-based camera, it's an event-driven camera. So the camera only records some event. Every time there is a photon, there is an event, and the camera returns XYT. Okay? So this is really an acquisition we have done at the output of the source when we were in the Fourier imaging plane. And you can see that if you look in time how the pairs were arriving on the sensor, you can see, in in reconstructed real time, like every time there is a pair, you can really see that they are anti-correlated onto the image at the output. So this allows us really to do much faster reconstruction of G2 by operating at the pair detection regime. Very fast. All right, so just summarize for this second part of the presentation. As I said, it was a bit more technical. I wanted to introduce you the different tools that we use to do correlation-based quantum imaging with photon pairs. So we use source of entangled photon pairs, and we perform two types of measurement. Intensity imaging, we are all very familiar with that, but also correlation imaging, which means essentially counting photon coincidence between many spatial modes in parallel of your sensor. That's where the information is. And then, of course, for that, you need a single photon sensitive camera to allow you to achieve that in an efficient and, let's say, as fast as possible way. So then I will go to really a concrete example of what can you do with this kind of technique for imaging, and in that case, for adaptive optics in microscopy. Before that, as I said, I'm happy to answer some questions on this second part of correlation-based quantum imaging. Maybe I lost you all.
Yeah. So I guess the performance improvement that you can get in quantum imaging is related to the properties of these correlations.
Yes.
Can you first give the link between the whatever property of the G2 function and the resolution, let's say enhancement or any enhancement, and then are there ways to go to higher order correlation functions to even push further these improvements?
Yeah, so if we take, so you're right. So what I just explained there is that independently of what you try to achieve with your source of photon pair, either resolution enhanced or background reduction or correlation-based adaptive optics, as I will show you there, you need to measure the G2. So in the case of spatial like resolution enhancement, if we take this example, the G2 measuring the correlation between photon pairs will give you essentially a PSF to the square. Okay, so you have the corresponding enhancement. If you have a higher Fox photon number state with more photons than 2, and you can measure higher order correlation, then you can achieve essentially h to the power of n in terms of resolution improvement of the PSF. Okay, but again, I know in quantum imaging, like the transverse resolution come back often as an example of something you can do, but I really want to emphasize that it's something that, okay, some of the systems have been developed on this idea, but there are many others. And this one, for example, will be an example, will be something where we use the correlation between photon pairs, but not for trying to improve the resolution, but trying to do adaptive optics with it. So something very different. But yes, fundamentally, the G2 gives you square, and if you have higher number of photon pairs, you get h to the power of n. But again, remember that you cannot talk about the resolution by only talking about the PSF. You need to talk about the noise of your system. So the flux is always important. If you go to 3 photons, the flux is going to be extremely, extremely low. All right, I will keep going then and show you one of the recent work we have done using this ability to measure correlation with the source in situation when we have an imaging system with some aberration in the system. All right. So as you all know, when you use a very simple microscope like a bright field microscope, in that case you observe mosquito larvae, very, very basic standard bright field microscope. This is what you expect to observe. And if you are either not very good at preparing the sample or very bad at aligning the microscope like we are, this is typically an observe that you can see what you observe in reality. Why do you see something like that that is not at the diffraction limit? It's because you have aberration in your system. It could be in the system itself, it could be the specimen itself. In both cases, you have something that is not really what you expect to see, at least not at the performance, the best performance of your microscope. So the main problem when you have aberration in microscopy, as you know, is to try to, let's say, remove this aberration to get a cleaner image at the diffraction limit. Then after we can think about, doing a resolution improvement, but first of all, we need to solve this issue. Why do you have that? In general, I mean, so generally I do this slide for, I mean, you're all very familiar with the point spread function. So in that case, the PSF is not exactly a diffraction limited PSF. So that's the signature of the aberration. And the goal, what you want to do is to get back to a diffraction limited PSF, something that when a point becomes a point at the output. I think we all good on that. The technique that many people use for that, so you can do some computational imaging, but adaptive optics and wavefront shaping are the main thing that you can do for removing this aberration. The main question in this field always the same. You know that you can potentially correct for the aberration. The big question is, how do you find the best correction? How do you program your spatial light modulator or the deformable mirror in order to remove this aberration the best way possible and get back to the sample that you are observing? Many techniques have been developed. I'm just mentioning a few of them with in classical microscopy. So something inspired by guide star, essentially a technique in astronomy, when you try to find somewhere in your sample that you use as a guide star and you optimize on that, okay? You can do direct or indirect sensing like that. It could be with a wavefront sensor or without a wavefront sensor. So I'm assuming you are all familiar with that. You can also do image-based DAO, which in that case, you just look at the properties of object and you optimize a certain metric in order to remove the aberration and find an optimal correction. And there are also some matrix-based DAO that require sometimes a pre-characterization of the sample, or sorry, of the system one way or another before to use the information of the matrix to retrieve the object. What we have, so this technique exists and they work. They all have their own limitation. In that case, you need to find a guide star that works pretty well, that is bright enough, for example. In that case, there is strong assumption to be made on the object, and there is also, it's not very clear, at least from my perspective, from the literature, which metric you have to use depending on the imaging modality you are using. It looks like there are many metrics, and essentially you choose the one that works. Matrix-based DAO is a bit more difficult to implement in practice, and especially you need a pre-characterization of the system. So the thing that we are proposed is actually to use correlation-based imaging with entangled photons to find this optimal correction, bypassing the different most of the different problems that you have with this technique. So let me get into that a bit more in details. Let's consider this system here, very simple. You have a photon pairs illumination, you Fourier image your photon pairs onto the sample, and then you image the sample onto an EMCCD camera. This is what you see in intensity. No big surprise, all right? But as I explained you a bit before, instead of just looking at the intensity at the output, you can also start counting the photons and look at the correlation between them. So let's do that again. And in that case, you build the correlation image. So this is the G2 projecting along to have a 2D visualization. When you have a sharp peak in the middle, it means that you are again in a situation where the photons are strongly anti-correlated. So in this image, even if you have an object, the photons, when you count them like one by one or two by two, you see that they always arrive in an anti-correlated way to form the image. So you are not only looking at the resulting intensity after summing many photons, you are also looking on about how actually the image has been constructed photon per photon. So you have two different types of information at the output. Okay? If you send just classical light onto that, you don't get these things. You will get just something flat. Photons are uncorrelated. In that case, they are strongly correlated, so you have this peak. So we can measure that in our system. So now let's put some aberration in the imaging system, very simply again. As expected, you have a blurred image at the output, no surprise. What is even more interesting is that you also have a spread and a decrease of the correlation peak. Why is that? Because in that case, independently of the object that you have here, the photons had to travel through this aberration. And at first, they were essentially going very perfectly correlated like that. But as soon as you go a bit through aberration, they start having some random deviation on each side. So you start losing the correlation. So they are less correlated than what they were without the aberration. And the question from us is, so why this is happening? So with the hands, it's pretty easy, but how can we link that to the aberration in our system? Let's take again a very simple experiment. Come back again to this system in Fourier imaging. And so I have no object there, just to make it simple. I just have the constant illumination and I have the peak. Let's introduce some aberration in our system by defocusing the lens. Very simple. I just defocus the lens and see what's going on. If I defocus the lens and see that the peak started to decrease there, Same if I go on the other direction. So the peak is effectively maximum if I have exactly no defocus in my system, if I have perfectly imaging, so if my PSF is diffraction limited. If you go a bit through the math, in fact, you can show that, of course, this correlation at first, they originate from the crystal and the SPDC process, but they also map the PSF of the system. So they are also dependent directly on the point spread function of your system. So measuring the correlation, in addition to just looking at the image, gives you a direct image of the PSF of the system, completely independent of the object that you are imaging. Then now we can measure two things at the output. So what we did, we say, okay, let's try to implement adaptive optics, but instead of trying to do image-based or focusing on the intensity image, let's forget about the intensity image and just measure the correlation, because here we have the PSF. So what we can just do is, find, for example, the maximum here and try to optimize the deformable mirror or the spatial light modulator on this metric that we know is exactly the PSF of the system. I'm skipping that because I think you all know that very well. So we did some very conventional Zernike AO algorithm, bam, bam, up. And after several amount of time, so every time you measure the correlation and you implement the different mask and compensate the aberration, and you reach a situation when you retrieve the peak of correlation at the output. So you have converged towards something that made the photon strongly correlated again. Then once you have that, you just look at the intensity at the output, and at the same time, it's corrected. But I'd never actually looked at the intensity image to do that. I just measure how the light was correlated in the image that was formed on my sensor. And I use this correlation as a metric to implement the AO process. What is important? We don't need any guide star, of course. It's not object dependent, and there is no pre-characterization to make in this kind of system. It's very naive in a sense, like the information of the PSF is encoded in this correlation between the photons, provided that you have correlation in the light, which I'm going to come back a bit later. So just the result that we had at the time. So again, it was a very simple microscope. We're talking about something that was made with lenses, with maybe a small objective with small numerical aperture. So it's a big object. So we managed to demonstrate it there, and also with some other object, we tried different type of aberration, and the correction essentially works pretty well and converge always to the correct solution of the system, the one that make the PSF diffraction limited. We also implemented it, I come back to that, the question I had before. So we also implemented it in a quantum imaging system. So we use the correlation in that case, both for removing the aberration and also exploiting the fact that you have the G2 that is the bit of the square, so having the double effect, which turned out to not be that great because we managed to correct very well the aberration, but compared to the ground truth, we were not really there. But this was mostly limited by the fact that our correlation images are a bit noisy experimentally and so on. At the time, we were also using an MCCD camera, not the recent camera. So if you do it perfectly, it will converge to something clean like that. All right. So now I'm going to move to the two last slides that talk about the perspective. Good. The perspective based on this work. But just what I want you to remember from this last example I show you. So in that case, we implemented a quantum imaging protocol using correlation between photon pairs. Not trying to improve the resolution or to do better SNR, but something a bit different when the intensity imaging modality was done purely classically. Okay, we see the image on an intensity image. In fact, we can even add another classical light into the system and do the imaging like that. What was done using the correlation between the photons was actually to measure the PSF. Once we can know the PSF, then we can implement the adaptive optics as I show you. What is really important in that case is that when we do this system, the PSF, the thing that we measure is only dependent on the PSF and not on the object that you are trying to image, which really remove anything that you really have a view. It's not really the PSF, as you can see, is the PSF convolve with itself, but you really have the PSF directly and you can implement only on that without any bias that you can have using a metric-based object, for example. So And this is where I wanted to come. This was an example. So we did that a couple of, like 2 years ago, using photon pairs, driven by our expertise in the lab, which is in experimental quantum optics. So long story short, we like to generate entangled photon pairs, and we try to do something with it. All right. But that's maybe not the right way of thinking about it. Okay. If you are all microscopists, so the right way of thinking about it will be, okay, no, let's think about the problem that we have in microscopy and see where this can be useful. Okay. So in that case, it's indeed a funny, promising concept. I don't think it's going to replace AO in general, but can be kind of an adding modality in AO that can help in some certain situation where it's difficult to reach the optimal correction. But it has strong practical limitation in this format. In this format, again, we only use it in bright field microscopy. We show that it can be adapted to reflection situation. But again, very simple microscope with lenses and so on. So not something really practical. Very, very low flux. And the correlation image was taking 1 minute. The overall optimization was taking an hour. So nothing has to move. Okay, that was the first thing that we did there. Pushing a bit more onto that, we realized recently that actually the nature of the correlation are not really important there. So the fact that I'm generating photon pairs, spatially entangled photon pairs with a strong G2, is useful to get a very high signal and a clear PSF at the output, but actually you don't need that. You can even do that with other type of correlation, even with classical correlation. So the math and the theory extend beyond pure correlation between photon pairs, even beyond correlation between photons. You can also do it with intensity correlation. So when we realized that, we said, oh, actually that's great, because then we can potentially implement it in something else than just our very, very restricted bright field configuration microscope. So we started, for example, to exploit non-classical correlation or correlation in fluorescent sample. Example, we have seen many times that this fluorescent marker that you put in your in fluorescence microscopy in general, most of them are single photon emitters. Okay, and instead of just measuring the intensity, you can measure this lack of correlation that was done in the Weissman to improve the resolution. But in fact, if you have the lack of correlation that you measure also map the PSF. So you can do exactly the same experiment in any of the fluorescence microscope that you have and get the PSF at the output. It's not as simple as that, but effectively, there is definitely a bridge that we can make between our very restrictive world of having photon pairs and doing imaging with it, and making really a bridge toward microscopy, trying to extend to something that is more useful to microscopists than this very limited situation. So we are currently trying to do some tests in fluorescence, Raman, light sheet, with very different type of correlation every time. Classical correlation, intensity correlation, or photon number correlation, or photon lack of coincidence, and so on, to try to improve that. And I'm highlighting that because that's generally what we call the move from quantum imaging to quantum-inspired imaging. You know, we really want to keep the word quantum because we know where the money comes from. But so the move there is, this happens a lot. Generally, researchers in quantum optics or doing quantum imaging try to do something with the source they are used to that have very strong correlation, and then it turns out to be adaptable to actually a classical system with classical correlation and things like that. So that's typically an example that you try to push forward in order to see if there is an interest of trying to implement this modality in conventional microscope. My very last slide. Some of you maybe have noticed that I use sometimes the word correlated photons or entangled photons. There is a subtle difference there, is that in the case I was presenting you before, we were only using the correlations between the photons, so produced by entangled photons, but correlated photons. You could generate correlated photons in a different way, even in a classical way, all right? Some of the things we look for in quantum imaging sometimes is to use genuine non-classical properties of light that do not exist in the classical domain to achieve imaging better than what can be done with classical optics. This is an example of it. We studied the case, exactly the same situation as before, when you have a strongly scattering medium in that case. When you send an image through a strongly scattering medium, you have a speckle pattern at the output. What we managed to achieve is that if you instead encode the image into entanglement of the photon pairs, you can make the medium transparent to entangled photons and not transparent to classical light. So entanglement itself has some interesting properties that can be used in an imaging context. I don't have the time to go over that, but these are some cool results. You can all understand that. This, without any scattering, you see the classical image, this is an 8, and you have the 8 in the correlation. Okay, it's not the best, but okay. You put some scattering, you see nothing. You put a correction that is adapted to photon pairs. So essentially, you tailor the scattering medium, and you can see the 8 again, but the system is still opaque. So you can transmit an image through a scattering medium by encoding it onto spatially entangled photon pairs, but it's not transparent to classical light. And this goes beyond what I've shown you before. Before, I was only using correlation and adapting, but you can see here with this simple example that we can even move further and use truly some genuine non-classical properties of light, such as entanglement, to do some interesting things in imaging. With that, I'm going to close, and thank you very much for your attention.
Really nice introduction to quantum imaging. You mentioned combining quantum imaging to Raman imaging. How would that work?
So I'm not an expert in Raman. Let's start with that. But so essentially what they did there, they had the two lasers that were, it was coherent Raman microscopy, the very first example. And instead of having two classical lasers to generate the Raman microscopy, the Raman image by a scanning Raman microscope, okay, they had one of them that was squeezed. And essentially, instead of, and then the measurement at the output was a nomodyne detection to be at the shot noise limit as well. So they were able, the process is exactly the same as the coherent Raman process. One of the lasers has less fluctuation of photons onto the amplitude quadrature. So one laser was non-classical. And then it turns out when you do the proper measurement at the output shot noise limit, you can reduce effectively, operate below the noise that you have with the same classical laser at the input. And they did something very smart. They choose a sample that burn or get changed over 1 milliwatt. And so they exactly set at the limit of what, they know they cannot go over with the classical laser after 1 milliwatt. And they managed to put their non-classical source at 1 milliwatt. And they show that at this limit, that is a physical limit for the sample, you can have a 30% enhancement. So it's more smart choice of the sample.
Hi, I have a question over here. Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you for the nice talk. I also have like problem-oriented question. Have you tried entangling different colored photons and optically separating the optical path? Because in live sample imaging is if you can use longer wavelengths, you can have a larger penetration depth, while on the other hand, the detectors are not that good, so you can quantum entanglement can help resolving this problem.
Yes. So there are two quantum imaging protocols that do this. Yeah. The first thing is ghost imaging with different colors. But in that case, so the idea there is that you can illuminate your sample at a visible that is typically in the infrared in one of the biological windows that is a bit difficult to detect. So to go deeper. And the other photon stays in the visible. You still need to detect both photons, but you can put a camera on on the visible photons and only a single photon detectors on the infrared light. So you need at least that. So that's one scheme. The second scheme is what is called induced coherence imaging, also use source of entangled photons. I wanted to go back to the, it's a bit further. The induced coherence imaging is the same story, but in that case, it's a non-linear interferometer in which you illuminate your sample in the IR, for example, even in the mid-IR very far, and recombine essentially the output onto a crystal, non-linear interferometer, and detect everything in the visible. Yes. This has been over the past 5 years, this has been all over the place in the quantum imaging community, this either induced coherence imaging or let's say more recent application of ghost imaging with exactly the advantage of bypassing the difficulty of detecting in the IR. Instead of using in-gas camera, you can still use silicon and everything works well. Yes, they do exist and they are really under development. I think Zeiss has for sure funded some projects about that.
Okay.
It's not there.
Hey,
Yep.
Thanks for the great talk. I also had a question about the adaptive optics part.
Okay.
So scattering is typically spatially varying in biological samples, and different adaptive optic systems have better or worse ways to account for this. How does this work with the entanglement? Do you just get one correlation for the whole, Fourier plane?
Very good question. Yes, we can take care also of spatially variant PSF.
Perfect, thank you.
What I've shown you there was only spatially averaging in very simple case. But yes, we do have actually the whole information, including the spatially variant PSF. Then for the correction, you need to adapt. You still have to be in the isoplanetic patch, so you need to adapt. But you can correct, everything one after. You have the whole information.